Something is happening in kitchens right now. Not in restaurants, not in factories. In ordinary homes, by people who are being careful with their money, thoughtful about waste, trying to do the right thing. And without knowing it, they are quietly doing something that science has connected to one of the most difficult cancers a human being can face. I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I am about to share with you is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to give you something most people never receive. A clear, honest warning before it matters. I am Dr. Ronald. I have spent decades working with patients, sitting across from them, looking them in the eye. And one of the hardest things I ever do is have a conversation that starts with the words, "Why did nobody ever tell me this sooner?" Today, I want to make sure that conversation never has to happen to you. Now, before we get into the 4 foods, I need to ask you something. If you have been looking for simple, honest health information that actually makes sense for your life, tap that subscribe button right now. And if you want to stay strong, active, and independent as you get older, leave one word in the comments below. Just type yes. It tells me you are here for the right reasons, and it tells me to keep making these conversations for you. All right, let us begin with something you need to understand about your pancreas, because this is where the story actually starts. Your pancreas sits quietly behind your stomach. It does not hurt when it is being damaged. It does not swell or send you a warning signal. Unlike many other organs, it has no way of telling you that something is going wrong. By the time a person feels the first real symptom of pancreatic cancer, whether that is a dull ache in the back, yellowing of the skin, or unexplained weight loss, the disease has often been developing silently for years. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is somewhere around 12%. Think about that for a moment. 12 out of every 100 people diagnosed are still alive 5 years later. That number has not changed dramatically in decades. And the reason oncologists focus so heavily on prevention is precisely because of that number. Once the disease announces itself, the options narrow very quickly. Prevention is not just the best strategy here. For most people, it is the only strategy that truly works. Now, what does that have to do with reheating your dinner? More than you might ever expect. There is a class of chemical compounds called nitroso compounds. You may also hear them called nitrosamines. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is one of the most respected bodies in the world for evaluating cancer risk, classifies nitrosamines as probable human carcinogens. Animal studies have shown strong evidence of their carcinogenicity across multiple organs, specifically including the pancreas. Research published in respected peer-reviewed journals has identified these compounds as one of the dietary pathways connected to pancreatic cancer risk. And here is the part that changes everything. 4 very common foods that are sitting in refrigerators all over the world right now, waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's meal, produce or concentrate these compounds when they are exposed to heat a second time. Let me take you through all 4. The first is processed meat. And I want to be careful here because most people think they already understand this one. They know processed meat is not health food. What they do not know is what specifically happens the second time heat touches it. Sausages, bacon, hot dogs, deli cuts, canned meat, smoked ham. Any meat that has been cured or preserved using nitrates and nitrites as part of the manufacturing process. These foods already carry a meaningful amount of nitroso compounds before they ever reach your kitchen. The nitrites used during processing react with the amino acids present in meat protein, and nitrosamines begin forming right there in the factory, before you even open the package. So when you cook that sausage in the morning, you are already applying heat to something that contains documented carcinogens. The body can process a certain amount of this. The protective compounds in a varied diet help buffer the damage. But when you reheat that same sausage the following day, you are applying heat again, this time without the same buffers, driving that nitrosamine-forming reaction forward at an accelerated rate. The higher the temperature, the more the reaction compounds. Microwaving processed meat on high heat, or frying it a second time, produces a meaningfully higher concentration of nitrosamines than the food contained after first cooking. Research examining this specific mechanism found that high dietary intake of these compounds was associated with elevated pancreatic cancer risk. Studies looking at processed meat consumption have proposed several pathways connecting it to cancer, with the compounds produced during high-temperature cooking consistently identified among the primary culprits. The practical guidance is simple. If you are going to eat processed meats, eat them once, cooked fresh and not reheated on high heat again. That is not asking you to never enjoy bacon or a sausage. It is asking you to change one small habit that most people never even think about. Now, the second food on this list is the one that surprises people the most, because it is something they reach for specifically because they believe it is good for them. Spinach. Yes, cooked spinach, reheated the following day, is one of the clearest examples of a genuinely nutritious food transforming into something it was never supposed to be. Here is why. Spinach contains naturally occurring nitrates. In fresh spinach, those nitrates are entirely harmless. They actually support healthy blood pressure and cardiovascular function. They are one of the reasons spinach is so often recommended. But when spinach is cooked and then left to cool and sit, even in the refrigerator, something begins to happen inside the vegetable. Bacterial activity and natural enzymatic reactions within the cooked spinach start converting those nitrates into nitrites. This process continues throughout storage. The longer cooked spinach sits, the more nitrite it contains. When you reheat it, heat drives two reactions simultaneously. First, it accelerates further nitrite formation. Second, it drives a reaction between those nitrites and the amino acids still present in the spinach, producing nitrosamines. A study published in the journal Foods specifically warned against storing boiled spinach for more than 12 hours at room temperature because of this direct conversion pathway. The World Health Organization's research arm confirmed that nitrosamines in food are established carcinogens linked to gastrointestinal and pancreatic cancers. Think about that irony for a moment. The same vegetable your doctor told you to eat more of, the one you add to your meals because you are trying to protect your health. Reheated the next day, it is chemically transforming into something that works against the very protection it was supposed to provide. The same principle applies to other high-nitrate vegetables. Celery in particular contains extremely high natural nitrate concentrations. When celery is cooked into soups or stews and then reheated repeatedly, each heating cycle drives that same nitrate to nitrosamine conversion further along. The simple solution is this. Cook leafy greens fresh in the amount you plan to eat that day. If you have leftover cooked spinach, eat it cold the next day in a salad. Cold does not drive the nitrosamine forming reaction. Heat does. That single change is all it takes. Let me check in with you for a moment. Are you surprised by what you are hearing? Does any of this connect to habits you have right now in your own kitchen? Leave a comment below. Tell me which food surprised you most. Your answer helps me understand exactly where the biggest gaps in health education are, and it shapes everything I create for you next. Now let us talk about the third food. This is one where most people have a vague sense that something is not quite right, but they do not understand the actual mechanism. Cooking oils. Specifically, what happens when you reheat food that was cooked in oil, or when you use oil that has already been heated once? When a cooking oil, particularly a polyunsaturated oil like sunflower, corn, soybean, or canola, is heated to cooking temperature, a process begins called lipid peroxidation. The chemical bonds in the fatty acids react with oxygen and heat, and a cascade of oxidized compounds begins to form. Aldehydes, including some particularly reactive ones. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Acrylamide in the presence of starchy foods. These compounds are genotoxic. That word means they cause direct damage to DNA. Now here is what changes when that oil is reheated, or when food that was fried in it is reheated. The oxidation process does not restart from zero. It continues from where it left off, compounding the damage from the previous heating cycle. Each time heat is applied again, the concentration of these harmful compounds increases. The temperature at which the oil begins to break down visibly, what is known as the smoke point, actually lowers with each use. So the oil reaches its toxic threshold faster and at lower temperatures with every subsequent heating. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified several of the primary compounds produced by repeated oil heating, including acrylamide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, as probable human carcinogens. Research examining the formation of these compounds found that temperature and cooking duration are the primary factors determining how much is produced. Every time you reheat fried food, fries, fried chicken, anything cooked in oil, you are applying additional heat to something that already underwent at least one prior oxidation cycle. There is a particular problem with microwave reheating of fried foods that most people never consider. The heat inside a microwave is deeply uneven. Some surfaces of the food reach extremely high temperatures, while other areas barely warm. The scorched areas, which may not even be visible to the eye, produce the highest concentrations of all three classes of harmful compounds. You are getting a hidden hotspot of chemical damage alongside food that looks perfectly normal. The guidance here is direct. Eat fried foods fresh immediately after cooking. Do not reheat them the next day. And discard used frying oil after one use. Never reuse it. I want to tell you about a woman named Margaret. She was 71 years old when she came to see me, practical and thoughtful, the kind of person who had always tried to make sensible choices. She told me she cooked large batches on Sundays to save time through the week. She reheated the same pan of food Monday through Friday. Fried vegetables, leftover rice, bits of sausage from Sunday breakfast. She had been doing this for decades. She was confused about why she kept having digestive problems, low energy, and discomfort she could never quite explain. We talked for a long time, not about her symptoms, but about her kitchen habits. And when I explained what was chemically happening inside those reheated meals, the look on her face was one I will never forget. Not fear, realization. She told me she wished someone had said this to her 30 years earlier. That is why I am saying it now. The fourth food is rice, and this one is different from the others in a very important way. The primary risk here is not a direct chemical carcinogen in the same sense as the first three. The risk is a bacterial toxin, one that is heat-resistant, meaning reheating does not destroy it, and that has a documented connection to chronic intestinal inflammation, which is itself one of the most well-established pathways to gastrointestinal cancers over time. When cooked rice is left at room temperature, and research consistently shows this happens routinely in households that cook rice in large batches, a bacterium called Bacillus cereus begins to multiply. Its spores survive the original boiling process and remain dormant in the cooked grain. Once the rice cools and sits, those spores activate. The bacterium produces toxins. One type causes vomiting within hours. The second type is produced specifically during the storage phase. The critical point that most people never hear is this. When you reheat the rice, you kill the bacteria. But the toxins they have already produced are heat stable. They survive full microwave reheating. They survive stovetop reheating. The bacteria are gone. The toxins remain in the food, and you eat them. In the short term, those toxins cause nausea, cramping, and digestive distress. Unpleasant, but usually not dangerous. The deeper concern is the long term. Repeated low-level exposure to heat-resistant bacterial toxins from improperly stored and reheated rice contributes to chronic intestinal inflammation. And chronic inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract is one of the most extensively replicated findings in cancer epidemiology as a pathway to gastrointestinal cancers. Every time the intestinal lining is irritated, the inflammatory response leaves microscopic damage. Over years and decades of this repeated weekly exposure, that accumulated cellular environment becomes one where cancer can develop more easily. The protocol for rice is specific and simple. After cooking, move rice into the refrigerator within 1 hour. That rapid cooling prevents the temperature from staying in the bacterial growth range long enough for significant toxin production. Store it refrigerated for no more than 24 hours. When reheating, reheat it once only, making sure it reaches a steaming hot temperature throughout, not just warm in the center. And never reheat rice a second time. If you regularly cook rice in large batches to save time through the week, I want you to think carefully about that habit. The convenience is real, but the cumulative risk of weekly bacterial toxin exposure across years is also real. Cook smaller amounts more often if you can. Let me bring this together for you, because I want you to leave this conversation with something clear and specific. Not anxiety, not confusion, just information you can act on starting today. Reheated processed meats produce nitrosamines, compounds that research has specifically linked to pancreatic cancer development and that cancer research agencies classify as probable human carcinogens. Reheated spinach and high-nitrate leafy greens convert their naturally occurring nitrates through a heat-driven reaction into those same nitrosamines, completely preventable by eating them cold or cooking them fresh. Reheated cooking oils and fried foods produce an accumulating chemical load that directly damages DNA, with each additional heating cycle compounding the one before it. And improperly stored and reheated rice delivers heat-stable bacterial toxins that survive reheating and accumulate as chronic intestinal inflammation over years of repeated exposure. None of this requires you to transform your entire diet. None of this asks you to stop enjoying food. It asks for 4 specific changes to how you handle leftovers. Do not reheat processed meats at high temperature. Eat cooked spinach and leafy greens cold the following day rather than reheating them. Discard used cooking oil and do not reheat fried foods. Cool rice quickly, refrigerate it within 1 hour, and reheat it once only, to steaming hot temperature throughout. Those 4 changes, applied consistently to your weekly kitchen habits, meaningfully reduce your exposure to the specific compounds that researchers and physicians connect to some of the cancers with the hardest outcomes. You are still here. That tells me something about you. It tells me you are someone who takes your health seriously, someone who wants to stay strong, stay sharp, and stay independent. That is exactly who this channel is for. If someone in your life reheats their leftovers every day without a second thought, share this with them. Not because the news is frightening, because the change is simple and the knowledge is worth something. Subscribe if you have not already. And next time, I want to talk with you about 5 breakfast foods that are consistently marketed as healthy for older adults, and what the research increasingly suggests is happening inside the body instead. That conversation may change what you eat tomorrow morning. Everything I have shared today is grounded in trusted medical knowledge, including research and guidance from the World Health Organization, National Institutes of Health, Mayo Clinic, Harvard Medical School, and the Cleveland Clinic. Take good care of yourself. I mean that.